Hey, it is you again. Good to see you. Danny Pommells and Noah Levick here with the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmu Works. Amy Fadul enjoying a much-deserved day off. Our producer, Ben Berry, making things happen behind the scenes. And Amy enjoying a day off as the Sixers are dragging us through this little 9-game stretch we highlighted, Noah, on a couple of previous podcasts. 0 for 2 to start this stretch, and Amy is not here, so I will use one of her beloved phrases. It is getting late early, Noah, as the Sixers team just finds ways to. There was a Houdini act against the Magic where their offense disappeared down the stretch. It just was not there when they needed it the most, particularly after the first half that Tyrese Maxey had. I mean, goes for 22 in the first half, ends up with 29 points. Like, just a little confusing, frustrating. And I guess he's just a bit overworked. And I don't want to, harp on him by any means, because there's plenty of blame or finger pointing that can go around as to why things haven't gone the way that the Sixers wanted. You could start at the Pelicans game and then get to the Magic game if you wanted to. But these were wins, all the same wins we highlighted in this stretch that we thought they might be able to get against these two teams, particularly the Pelicans. Picked up their 8th win of the season, if I'm doing the math correctly. The frustration level has to be growing. It can't be getting any smaller. And we talked really half jokingly about the half glass, half full, half empty thing on the previous podcast. It ain't getting more full at this point, Noah. Can you bring us some sense of understanding of where we are, where we're going right now, and how things are transpiring with the team after these past couple games?
Yeah, well, Joel Embiid is still out. That's the, I think, important bottom line. 4 straight games missed for both him and Andre Drummond with left foot injuries. And honestly, Adem Bona, in my eyes, has been pretty good as the spot backup starter. But outside of that, yes, not a lot of bright spots for the Sixers. The Pelicans loss, certainly a worse one than the Orlando defeat. But that said, the Magic were similarly decimated by injuries. Started this game with both Wagner's out, KCP out, a bunch of their key guys sidelined, and then Tristan Da Silva, their rookie starter, subs out after a minute or two with an illness. Their starting center, Goga Bitadze, leaves the game before halftime with a right hip injury, and the Sixers still cannot find a way to win it. I think it's one that really stings because, again, the late game execution was just so poor. I think Paul George fouling out of this game is inexcusable. Sure, there's been, dubious whistles against him and controversial calls and whatever, but there's, 2 minutes and 49 seconds left. He just hit a big 3. Have a little more discipline, be a veteran star, and don't foul out when your team really needs you in that spot. So, yeah, I think the late game problems have emerged as a theme. And I think absolutely they continue to look like a team that's still in the early stages of the chemistry building process and, making mistakes that are along those lines. And that just can't happen given where they're at in the standings and all there is left to do here. So, it's a bleak big picture is how I would describe it. And ultimately, this team, as we've all known, they need Joel Embiid healthy for a sustained stretch if they hope to do anything. But those hopes have certainly not improved over the last couple of games.
And these are the things that are, exacerbated on bad teams, man. The injury bug hits, it kind of flows through the squad. Key players are out. Even the guys who have been playing well or have been making an impact are in street clothes and not playing. The losses pile up. The miscues and turnovers and things like that, missed calls kind of pile up as well. And it's frustrating, watching the Sixers go through this stuff because you come off a season with Maxey and the most improved player stuff, but he's in such a role that he's experienced a bit of regression in some aspects just because of the topsy-turvy nature of who's in and who's out and what they're asking him to do on a night-to-night basis. So it's frustrating for sure. And I'm starting to hear things, Noah. You're out in the community, and it's one thing, somebody shouts something to you that's, incoherent or half cocked. But when you start to see consistency from people who are completely unrelated about, oh man, what's going on with the V? Why isn't he in there? And man, we shouldn't have got Paul George, or we should, you start hearing those same things from the people are starting to feel uneasy and uncomfortable. And all of a sudden folks are talking about the lottery and the draft and Cooper Flag. And they're like, wait a minute, this is supposed to be a team contending for a championship. And it's just not that I'm like the sounding board for Sixers fans, but you bump into your barber or your son's barber, because I have no hair, but you bump into your son's barber, you bump into the friend of your dad who likes to talk basketball, or the person who might have recognized you before and wanted to bring up something about the team or something like that. And all of a sudden these things kind of mesh together to give you a perception of how people are feeling about the team, not including social media, which can be a dark place. But I feel for you Sixers fans. I feel for everybody out there trying to navigate what this team is, the lack of identity. You can see the frustration with Nick Nurse. And I think not only is it all the injuries and things like that, but these are teams you should beat. These are situations and circumstances that you practice and plan for. But like you said, the late game execution just seems to be failing them. So I just want to send a salvo out to all the Sixers fans that the pain is felt, the frustration is felt, and hopefully there's some silver lining here popping up soon. But as things are trending right now, Noah, they almost might need to be sellers at the trade deadline. They might need to. This might be the end of Gershon Yabusele. They might be moving on from him for a number one draft pick or something of that sort. So it's suddenly making the range a lot more broader for this team, as opposed to being a narrowly focused championship mindset.
That would still really surprise me a lot if Gershon Yabusele goes elsewhere at the deadline. But I hear you, yeah, and it did stand out in that New Orleans game. That was probably the loudest the boos have been this season, and quite justifiably, because that was in all likelihood the Sixers' worst loss of the year. So yeah, you can feel the fans are very displeased with the product, and the fact that the expectations were very high and have not come close to being met thus far. And yeah, to me, part of what is painful about the loss to Orlando is they played very well for large stretches of that game. They got an efficient Eric Gordon start. Kelly Oubre Jr. chipped in some nice contributions on both ends. And the Sixers took a 9-point lead late in the third quarter. But you look back at that game, and they started the first quarter poorly. They started the third quarter, with an extreme level of sloppiness, 5 turnovers in the first 2 minutes and change. Obviously, not the kind of thing that indicates a team is really ready to go out of the locker room and locked in on the game plan details and focused on everything their coach wants them to. So I think that's part of why that's one you really feel you should have had. Sure, Orlando still had plenty of good players out there, but certainly a game where the Sixers, I think, will rue letting it slip. So yeah, coming up, it's not getting easier. It's actually getting much more difficult. The 32-6 OKC Thunder coming to town on the second night of the back-to-back. The New York Knickerbockers. So yeah, the Sixers, I think, for me, they've just got to start first and third quarters better. I think that has to be an immediate emphasis. I think it was nice in a way that when Nick Nurse turned to his own defense, put in some younger guys, made some of those natural adjustments, the Sixers actually found their footing in this game. But it's pretty bad that was necessary for him to make those sort of moves, because his team really just wasn't ready to go from the opening tip after having suffered perhaps their worst loss of the season. Just a bad look across the board there. So now, yeah, after dropping a couple games that they really should have had, they've got to pull off an upset or two in this testing back-to-back coming up in Philly.
Man, we did Thursday's podcast, and that's my Friday. I'm off Friday and Saturday, so Thursday is my Friday. Excuse me. Paul Hudrick, a friend of the podcast, good friend of ours from Liberty Ballers. Um, he hit me up, was like, "Bro, I'm taking Miles to his first Sixers game on Friday." I'm like, "That's awesome." His son is like 3 years old. Ends up being a whole family affair. Him, his wife, his son, they all go to the game. Didn't even make it to halftime. He said he was like, Miles was like falling asleep or whatever it was, and they wanted to beat the traffic on top of that. So it all kind of came together well for them. They got to see and experience all the revelry, and he had them down on the court, and they had a great time. And he's like, "Oh," I'm like, "Bro, this might be a good game." I'm like, "Hopefully, Zion's back," because that was after he had that crazy windmill dunk, and he looked like he was, his back to his usual self. And he's like, "Yeah, I hope Zion." He's like, "I hope Embiid plays." And I'm like, "Oh, of course." I'm like, "But we'll see what happens or whatever." And of course, no Zion, no Embiid, neither of them on the floor. But and I guess if you're Paul's son, it's like you get the booze, you get the missing players, you get the full Sixers
Yeah,
experience.
you really do. Yeah, like I think back to some of my lasting, Sixers watching memories as a kid, and it is the Philly fans having ire toward the players and having
Right.
disappointment after terrible playoff losses. I remember, I think it was '03 maybe, they lost game 6 in overtime to the Pistons, and, a fan was talking to, little old me on the way out about how this is the life of a Philly fan and whatever.
Right,
So,
exactly.
yeah, like,
The
you
full
start
indoctrination, bro.
you start them early on that experience, and, yeah, I mean, I think it's still very enjoyable, even if it's not a win as a kid. Just you're soaking all the atmosphere in for the first time. And hey, CJ McCollum, I guess, maybe looks like one of the
Woo.
best players in the world if that was, one of your first experiences watching a Sixers game. So, yeah, it's not a great team to grow up on in some ways nowadays, but I think yes, if you're a Sixers fan, if you're a Philly sports fan, there's going to be ups and downs, and the ups might not be that frequent in your life. That's just the reality.
Hey, the names on the jerseys and the faces change, but some of the sentiments remain the same, regardless of when you are indoctrinated into the Sixers fandom. And man, I thought that was pretty ironic that that was his first game, and how he experienced that. I think to me, as a fan, that I went to an occasional Sixers game when I was younger, but comparing those experiences from now to then, a big part, particularly when I first took my kids to the newer Sixers experience, especially after the Adam Aronson confetti era and all that, those pregame torches, bro, are definitely a big part of the experience to me. Like if you're a kid and you're coming in and those things start going off and you feel the heat, you're like, whoa, like I've seen so many people like get caught off guard by those things. I'm sure you have too.
Yeah, it warms it right up there on press row for us because it is one of the colder arenas in the NBA. So that's a big jolt of heat. But yeah, I think honestly, if you're a young kid, you remember, like for me, hip hop, the mascot back in the
Yes,
day. I'm
absolutely.
sure kids now remember Franklin making a behind the head half court shot or whatever. So yeah, we all fixate on the little nitty gritty details, but as a kid, the entertainment part is very big in the evening, and Sixers are trying their best to be entertaining at least. But yeah, you're not growing up on winning elite basketball right now if you're a big fan of this team as a kid, and perhaps it'll get better when the big fella's on the floor. But yeah, right now you're having to live through some losses.
More on this Sixers team coming up shortly, but we will show some love to our title sponsor, always here with us every step of the way. That is Wilmington University. Advance your career with a graduate degree from Wilmington University. At WilMU, your dream is our mission. Get to know us at wilmu.edu. Back here on the Sixers Talk podcast, and we buried the lead a little bit. Of course, this is a podcast where we cover all things 76ers and the team being paramount among them, but The power players and billionaire business owners here in the city of Philadelphia have come together to put the kibosh on the downtown Sixers Arena, the 8th and Market or 11th and Market, Market East. Downtown Arena is no more. That will not be happening. $1.3 billion will be allocated elsewhere. And based on all indications and reports, a much bigger commitment to a much more detailed and nuanced South Philly arena will be made in a combination with Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment, Josh Harris, David Blitzer, and all that ownership group will team up with Comcast. Brian Roberts, Adam Silver had some say in it, Jeffrey Lurie, Roger Goodell. There's a lot of players now involved in what's happening here with the Sixers arena. All that to say that there will be a brand new South Philly arena. There will be some retail and reimagining of that downtown arena. Apparently, the Eagles have some interest because their lease will be up or something of that sort within the next 9 years. Please do your research on this to get all the full details. There was just a press conference to explain from Mayor Cheryl Parker. Josh Harris was there. They had Adam Silver on video conference. They just had a press conference that was supposed to start at 11, and it bled into probably like 10 minutes before we started this podcast. The No Arena Coalition also spoke today, touting this as a big victory for the people, because regardless of what you may have heard or read about, that the billionaires came together, it was actually the people's voices that were heard that really changed the narrative on how this thing went. So basically, there will be a new arena, and in all that, a WNBA team is supposedly coming to Philly with the combination of the Harris Blitzer group as well as Comcast and Brian Roberts, Comcast Spectacor. So a brand new 50-50 arena, Flyers, Sixers, and I'm sure that there is no way that the Sixers abandoned the downtown avenue and arena they were pursuing without this being a better deal, in my opinion. So I would assume that this it's still a lot of details to be fleshed out, but I'm assuming that this is a better situation for them in the long run, and overarchingly, and particularly, compromise and coming together benefits more people than it would be to not have that. So apparently there was a lot of coming to the table and hashing things out that played well, and no downtown arena, a new South Philly arena. Had to catch you off guard, Noah, when you heard that after everything that went into the surveys and the meetings and the council meetings and the voting and the questions that were asked, had to catch you off guard, because it really caught me off guard. And I was really looking for some answers pretty quickly yesterday that weren't available, but had to catch you off guard.
Yeah, for me, just the fact that they went through the whole process
Right.
with city council, which, as you said, was extensive and a little contentious at times, and brought about, highly publicized protests. Like they went through all that, and now they've gone in an entirely different direction here. So yeah, we are still looking at the Philadelphia 76ers. No New Jersey 76ers on the horizon. As you said, I think the gist of it is that it's, a project that many sides feel should be beneficial to them. Sixers, Flyers, Comcast, HBSC. And yeah, the WNBA team is not locked into Philly, but it is noted in that press release that Comcast and HBSC will both be making a bid. And you have to assume, especially given Adam Silver, is making himself a public face in this, that he's in all likelihood going to be
Endorsing that, yeah.
Yeah, endorsing it to Engelbert, the WNBA commissioner. And you've got to think Philly would have a pretty good chance as the WNBA looks to continue its expansion. So we talked about before, like that to me feels sensible on so many fronts. And now I think the notion that it's backed by all these power players, and that there will be this arena come in again in 2031, same timeline. yeah, that should enhance
Which
the
doesn't seem so far away anymore. It's
It's
like,
getting closer. Yeah, now that we've made it to 2025, it's like, whoa, it's coming up. I can
yeah,
see it
we've been
on the
talking
horizon.
about this for like a year and a half, like a year and some change now.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah. Look, like Tyrese Maxey should like be in the prime of his career still when this arena is built. So yeah, it's in the moderate future. I don't think we'll call it the near future, but it's coming up. And certainly it had reached the point where there needed to be finality. We thought we had that, right? When
It's
the
very much so.
Market East proposal went through council, but now we have cemented a new plan that'll keep the Sixers in South Philly and have them continue to share this arena with the Flyers. So yeah, interesting. A lot of angles to it that we're all still trying to process. But yeah, I think for me, it's quite obvious that the hope is that many people can do well financially from this, and I think have some stability. Whereas I think obviously the notion of the Market East Arena, it was a different kind of project, right? Like that there was going to be a greater degree of uncertainty about the logistics of that, and of course we had already seen that it was polarizing / divisive in terms of community feedback, etc. So yeah, definitely. Bottom line for me, not a thing I saw coming, though. Now that we've got some details on it, I can understand the hope, at least, that it's a project that will make a bunch of people happy and will sort of keep the Sixers in a place where fans are happy to see them and yeah, kind of have that established infrastructure in the South Philly sports complex area. So yeah, I'm sure a lot more news on that'll be coming down the pike, but
Yes.
definitely a big drop there in over the weekend.
Um, where do you fall on the whole, man, what a waste of time by the 76ers, and they, dragged this whole process out and, ended up, not going with the downtown arena and just cycling back to the South Philly thing? Or do you feel it's more like, but this is part of the process. This was part of the vetting and making sure it was the right thing. You had to go through these paces in order to get to this result. And you vetted it in front of the city council. You did all the research and land surveys and see who was for it and was against it. Where do you fall on that? Do you feel like you're on either side of how the process got to this point?
I mean, yeah, for me, it didn't feel like the main motivating factor behind the 180 was, the community feedback necessarily, right? Because they went through the process of pushing it through city council, and that
Right.
was extensive.
Feedback or not, they were trying to get to the end result, right?
Right, right. Like, that's not to say at all that the Sixers were oblivious to the feedback,
No,
didn't
not at
care
all. Not at
about
all.
it, didn't do any research. Like, I think none of those claims would be accurate. But yeah, it did feel like there was a real determination to get it in front of city council and then to get it through. So certainly now that all looks pretty unnecessary and like the kind of thing, yeah, that just didn't need to happen. I'm not sure it was, necessarily incredibly damaging. I mean, it took up time of the city council and energy and all that, but I guess for me, it's like what matters is where we ultimately end up, and we'll see how this new plan pans out. But yeah, for me, I guess in all honesty, I wouldn't have the most positive slant on that, just because it did feel like the Sixers for quite a while were really set on getting this through, getting it approved, getting the mayor's approval and the backing of unions and major players in the Philly political space. So none of that to me seems like it was awesome, but I think at the end of the day, we'll see how the arena turns out, and that's certainly what we'll all be caring about the most and judging the most in 2031 and in the decades to come.
And important to note that um, with the canceled arena plans for Center City, there's also a revitalization of Market Street East that Comcast and Harris Blitzer have committed to, and not exactly sure what that may be, but they have still committed dollars, time, energy toward helping revitalize that area that they were planning on building the arena in. So Comcast had originally offered a counter proposal, Comcast Spectacor, a counter proposal for the area where the Sixers were going to be building the arena, where they propose like a medical research hub or something to that extent. So maybe that's the idea that they're going to try to bring together. I'm not sure, but even though they're abandoning the arena plans in that Market Street East area, there's still an investment going to be made there by the organizations. So that also is part of all of this reimagining of what will work and what isn't going to work. And important to note that Macy's has decided to remove one of their flagship stores right there in the Wanamaker building. So that's another vacant space down there on the Market Street East corridor that will also need to have a tenant or something happen there with that historic building. But that's supposed to happen in March, I think. So just gives you an idea that, yes, that area needs some help and some dollars. And good to know that whenever those dollars do come, that there will be some money from what has been a very arduous process. I think that's a good word to use to get to this point, that there will be some money allocated to that area. So
Yeah.
a lot of shoes left to fall, so to speak, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But Philadelphia will not be the same from this day forward because of what is happening with this arena and where it will be built and all the things that are here on the horizon.
Yeah, right. I think as was true with the original proposal, important what all the specifics are of that investment in Market East, exactly, what the money allocated will be, what they've got cooking there. But yes, I think notable that I think all parties recognize that it wouldn't have made a ton of sense to be like, oh, we're just abandoning that area and we're out. Like they at least are trying to, on paper, stay committed to that notion of helping revitalize the area where they were originally planning to build the arena. So yeah, it's a ton to sort through. Some of it's complicated. Some of it's not so complicated. Sixers and Flyers planning to stay in South Philly, and
Right.
I think there's, to me, that it definitely sticks out that, like, in many ways we probably know what we're getting with this new project, where I think the initial project obviously was polarizing and I think came packed with a lot of risk and uncertainty. So that doesn't seem to be the case as much, at least with my first read on this dramatic pivot that the Sixers and Flyers have made here.
Couple extra things on top of that. $300 million was put into the Wells Fargo Center to refurbish it, and it looks fantastic. I really enjoyed the changes that they've made in a lot of aspects. I didn't quite think that they would work out so well, but I mean, hey, it's a subjective thing, so people can have other varying opinions. Also, our offices are in the Wells Fargo Center. What does that mean for NBC Sports Philadelphia? Are we in the new arena? Do we go to the Comcast Center downtown? That's an interesting caveat. And another thing, just in my thinking about all this happened, Noah, this is the third iteration of a new arena under this Harris Blitzer group, or with Josh Harris as the majority owner. We had the Penn's Landing proposal, we had the downtown Center City proposal, and now here we are with this new joint venture with Comcast Spectacor with a 50-50 split with the Flyers. So that's a pretty concerted effort into putting his money into the Philadelphia space, making the Sixers organization very avant-garde, trying to push the envelope as far as wanting to spend and make things as current as possible with the arena that the team plays in and the surrounding areas that are supported by the arena. Now, the product on the court may not reflect that as much success, but I just an interesting, they sell the team to Josh Harris and his ownership group for a little under 300 million, if I remember. He makes this boku bucks turning this organization to $1 billion organization, and there's more of the forward thinking of getting a new arena to couple with that he has at least 50% control in. So this dude's a major player, man. A major player here.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on it would be mainly just HBSC was not going to stick with the status quo. They weren't going to be renters in the Wells Fargo Center, for infinity. They were quite determined to make a change, to have a new arena of some kind, and yes, very, very aggressively explored multiple avenues to try to make that happen. And now they've, in some ways, kind of landed back where they started, except quite obviously in a position that they feel is preferable.
Yeah, a lot of their own terms in some.
Yeah, I think just the fact that they were like the reality is right now they're renters in the Wells Fargo Center in an arena that I agree has become nicer, but is not, this modern state of the art crypto.com-ish arena. It's, an arena built in the 90s that's decent, gets the job done, has become nicer in the last year or two, but the Sixers, I think, wanted change and worked very hard to try to get something that they felt would check the boxes they needed. So evidently, they have reached that point here in this joint venture with the Flyers, Comcast, and we'll see how it all pans out.
He is Noah Levick. I'm Danny Pommells. This has been the Sixers Talk podcast. Of course, you can find Noah Levick's work at NBC Sports Philadelphia.com. Noah, Shea Gilgeous, Jalen Williams, and the boys are rolling in here to South Philly. Lou Dort. What should fans be thinking? Just give me one more thought.
I thought you were going to mention Isaiah Joe.
Isaiah Joe as well. Excuse me.
Player that could, sure help the Sixers right now. He makes shots, gives you solid work on both ends. Sixers also saw Trevelyan Queen, by the way, last night, who had a big putback dunk late in that game. He
did. He was very hyped up about it.
Yeah. It just feels like they're in this stretch where they're being reminded of the guys that were once on their team, and they're having all the breaks go against them, and that they're just not playing very good basketball after an encouraging little stretch there. So I think going into this back-to-back, it would be awfully surprising if the Sixers started it out with a win, but they'll try to prove some people wrong. And as always, the big simple question is who's going to be available for that game. So will Caleb Martin be back after sitting out with right groin soreness? Is Andre Drummond going to return from this left foot injury? And of course, is Joel Embiid kind of going to add some games to, I think, 12 or 13 now on the season? We'll see. It's all up in the air. But the Sixers will be hosting a very good team on Tuesday night, and they'll have to do a lot better than they have lately to be competitive in that game and maybe even win it against a ball club that is 32-6.
Will be interesting to see what kind of energy Sixers fans have for this OKC team. There will be some talent on the floor for sure. Be sure to check that game out because you could see some things you haven't seen, but we will be there every step of the way, win, lose, or draw. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening and watching. Amy Fadul will be with us Thursday when we rejoin you. But take care. This has been the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmington Works.